Have you ever witnessed a moment when a single act of kindness on the coldest night changed the fate of an entire family? Tonight's story begins beneath a winter sky, where a tired police officer and his loyal German shepherd stumble upon two little girls sleeping on a frozen mattress, alone, frightened, and forgotten by the world. What he does next will not only expose a hidden truth buried in the shadows, but will also remind us that sometimes the greatest heroes appear quietly, without warning. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And no matter where you are, I hope this story brings you warmth, and I wish you a peaceful, beautiful day ahead. Winter had a way of swallowing Pine Hollow whole. The town, tucked against the northern Oregon mountains, lay under a sky thick with low silver clouds that seemed to press down on every roof. Street lamps buzzed through gusts of sleet, their cones of light flickering like exhausted candles. The wind dragged needles of snow across the asphalt, and the cold shrank the world into a handful of dim blocks and echoing alleys. It was the kind of night where no one should have been outside, least of all children. Officer Elias Rowe, 36, drove slowly along the deserted back streets. He was a tall man with a broad build, shaped more by years of physical work than by a gym. Shoulders slightly rounded from long nights behind the wheel, jaw shadowed with scruff, he rarely remembered to shave on time. His brown hair, usually kept short, had grown a bit over the past weeks, brushing lightly against the collar of his Navy patrol jacket. His eyes carried the muted steel blue shade of someone who had seen more grief than he let on. Elias's nature was quiet, observant, and deeply patient, a temperament shaped by the sudden loss of his wife 3 years earlier, an event that had hollowed a space in him he never quite managed to refill. Since then, he lived alone, speaking more to his police radio than to other people, except for one loyal companion. In the back seat of the SUV, Ranger, a 4-year-old male German shepherd, sat upright with dignified alertness. Ranger's coat was the classic black and tan pattern, dark saddle over his back, tan legs, a proud muzzle, and intelligent amber eyes that scanned everything. Muscular but lean, he had the fluid confidence of a trained K9 who knew both discipline and affection. Ranger's temperament was famously steady, loyal, bold, gentle with children, fearless toward danger. He had become Elias's partner 2 years ago, after failing his first K9 exam, for a silly, almost endearing reason. He had abandoned a tracking drill midway to comfort a crying toddler at the test site. To Elias, that single act said more about Ranger's heart than any perfect score ever could. As they continued through the icy streets, the GPS crackled out a reroute due to a fallen tree on the main road. The new path led them past industrial lots and rows of aging duplexes, corners of Pine Hollow that time and investment had forgotten. Elias rubbed a tired hand across his jaw. He had been on shift for 10 hours already, and the persistent loneliness of long winter nights made his chest ache more sharply than usual. But Ranger suddenly shifted, ears springing forward. A soft growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Elias glanced at him. "What is it, bud?" Ranger pressed a paw against the door, his body angling toward a narrow alley ahead, an alley cluttered with broken pallets, rusted water pipes, and wind-scattered cardboard. The kind of place stray animals sometimes hid, the kind of place where no good thing ever waited. Elias slowed the SUV. The headlights washed over the alley entrance, carving a pale tunnel through the frost. Ranger's growl deepened, not aggressive, alert, focused. That was enough for Elias to ease the vehicle to a stop and shift it into park. The moment he stepped out, the cold slapped his skin like a sheet of ice. His breath formed a white cloud in front of him. Ranger jumped out behind him, paws silent on the pavement, body low but controlled. The wind rattled loose metal like distant chains. At first, Elias saw nothing but debris, flattened boxes, the remains of a collapsed wooden crate, an old mattress half soaked by frost. But then, something moved. A ripple beneath the battered quilt on that mattress. Elias's pulse quickened. He took one slow step forward. Ranger sniffed the air, then approached with his head slightly lowered, tail held still, his stance for fragile, proceed carefully. When Elias was close enough, he froze. 2 children lay curled together on the mattress. 2 girls. The older one, maybe 9, had a mess of dark blonde hair tangled from wind and dirt, her cheeks reddened by cold, eyes wide even in sleep. Her small arm wrapped tightly around a younger girl, no more than 5, whose brown curls stuck to her forehead in icy strands. Their clothes were thin, mismatched, barely warm enough for autumn, let alone a near-freezing winter night. Their breaths were shallow, their lips pale. Elias felt something inside him jolt, as if the cold had reached straight into his ribs. Memories he had locked away long ago flickered back. The nights he spent alone after his wife's death, the nights as a child when he himself had hidden from arguments in his parents' house before things got better. Pain had a peculiar way of recognizing itself when it saw it in someone else. He crouched carefully, making sure his shadow didn't fall directly on them. Ranger sat beside him, ears pricked forward but posture gentle, the soft whine slipping from his throat, revealing his worry. The older girl stirred, her eyes fluttered open, blue, sharp with instinctive fear, and she immediately tightened her grip on the younger child. She looked from Elias to Ranger, assessing danger, ready to fight or flee. Her face held both defiance and terror, a combination no child should ever have to learn. "Hey," Elias said softly. "You're safe. I'm not here to hurt you." The younger girl pressed her face into her sister's chest, trembling slightly. The older one didn't speak, but she kept her eyes on him, watching as if one wrong move would shatter whatever thin line of safety she sensed. Elias removed his jacket, thick and warm from the heated car, and slowly draped it over them. When the fabric touched her shoulders, the older girl flinched, but she didn't retreat. Ranger carefully nudged closer and lowered his head in a dog's gesture of peace. "My name is Elias," he continued. "This here is Ranger. Can you tell me yours?" After a long, tight pause, the girl whispered, "Harper." Her voice was raspy, stiff with cold and distrust. She looked down at the small child in her arms. "And June." The wind howled through the alley, making the mattress shudder. Elias stepped to block the worst of it. Harper's eyes darted to the alley entrance, then back to Elias, as if evaluating the odds of running past him, even though she clearly didn't have the strength. "How long have you been out here?" Elias asked. Harper's jaw tightened. She shook her head, refusing the question. "It's okay," Elias said gently. "You don't have to tell me right now, but you can't stay out here any longer. You'll freeze." Harper didn't answer, but when Elias extended a slow, steady hand toward June, not to grab her, just to offer help, the younger child peeked out from her sister's arms. June had soft brown eyes that looked too exhausted for her age. She didn't flinch when Ranger slowly leaned closer and nudged her knee with his nose. Instead, she reached a tiny hand forward and touched the top of his head. Ranger wagged his tail, just once. It was the first sign of trust. Elias knew he had to move before the cold did more damage. Lifting June carefully, he felt how unbelievably light she was. Harper shot up instantly, as though terrified of being separated. But Elias extended his free hand to her in reassurance. She hesitated, then stood close enough that he could support her with his arm as they walked out of the alley. Ranger kept stride beside them, ears swiveling in every direction, as if guarding them from unseen threats. At the SUV, Harper froze again, staring at the vehicle's interior like it was a trap. But when June whimpered from the cold, Harper climbed in, wrapping Elias's jacket tighter around the both of them. Elias turned the heater on high and watched through the rearview mirror as Harper's guarded fear softened into something else. Uncertainty. Maybe hope. For a moment, the only sound inside the vehicle was the heater blowing warm air and Ranger's quiet breathing. Elias asked, "Do you have anywhere safe to go?" Harper's eyes lowered. She shook her head. The headlights cut through the frost as Elias pulled away from the alley. Ranger shifted to the back seat, resting his head gently on Harper's knee. June leaned into her sister and whispered something too soft to hear. The girls huddled together, but now there was warmth around them, something closer to safety than anything they'd felt in a long time. As the SUV rolled toward Elias's home on the edge of Pine Hollow, Harper's eyes kept flicking to the dark windows outside, as though she feared someone might be following. And though Elias didn't say it aloud, he felt something too, a quiet instinct that tonight was changing the course of his life, and theirs, in ways none of them yet understood. But for now, All he could do was bring them somewhere warm and pray it would be enough for tonight. The snowfall softened as Elias turned onto the long gravel road leading to his cabin on the outskirts of Pine Hollow. The place sat beneath towering pines coated with fresh frost, the porch light glowing amber against the night. Warmth radiated faintly from its windows, a stark contrast to the alley of rusted metal and wind-burned misery where he had found the children just 20 minutes earlier. Inside the SUV, Harper watched the trees pass with a tension that sat rigid in her shoulders. Her fingers remained curled around the hem of Elias's jacket draped over her, and June. June, still pale and shivering, leaned heavily against Harper's side. Ranger sat between the front seats now, occasionally glancing back with low, reassuring grunts, as if reminding the children that no danger followed them here, not yet at least. Elias parked beside the cabin. The wind had eased, leaving the night eerily still, like the world was holding its breath. He stepped out and opened the back door slowly, mindful not to overwhelm them. Harper's legs dangled over the edge for a moment before she slid down, clutching June's hand. Ranger hopped out, landing with a soft thud, then shook the cold from his fur and trotted ahead, as if leading the way inside. Elias unlocked the door. The familiar scent of cedar and old woven blankets drifted out. The cabin was modest, a living room with a brick fireplace, a small kitchen tucked beneath open shelves, and a hallway leading to 2 bedrooms. The interior held a quiet warmth that had soothed Elias through many difficult nights, but now the space felt strangely different, as though anticipating the arrival of the 2 fragile souls standing behind him. "Come in," Elias said gently. "It's warmer inside." Harper hesitated at the threshold. Her eyes darted from the furniture to the shadows in the corners, as if mapping escape paths. Trauma lived in such small movements. June took a single step into the house first, tugged Harper's sleeve, and whispered, "It smells nice." Harper blinked and followed her in. Ranger circled them with a protective calmness before trotting to his water bowl in the corner. Elias moved to the fireplace and stoked the embers until flames rose, spreading soft light across the wooden floor. The children hovered by the door. Elias walked back to them, crouched to their height, and spoke with the gentle authority of someone who remembered his own childhood fears too well. "You can sit anywhere you like. I'm going to get you both warm clothes and some food." Harper gave a tiny nod, barely visible, but it was something. Elias went down the hallway into his bedroom closet. On the top shelf, he kept a box filled with supplies he never expected to use. Sweaters from donation drives, children's hats, and mittens he had kept after his wife died, because he didn't have the heart to throw them away. Tonight, it felt like those items finally found their purpose. He returned with 2 soft flannel shirts, a pair of fleece pants for each girl, and thick socks. Harper took the clothes slowly, as though worried she wasn't allowed to accept something so clean. June pressed the fabric to her cheek with small, grateful breaths. "Bathroom is down the hall," Elias said. "Take your time." While the girls went to change, Ranger padded over to Elias, nudging his hand with his nose. Elias rubbed behind the dog's ear. "I know," he murmured. "Something's off." Ranger's earlier alertness in the alley lingered like a quiet alarm. Elias wasn't sure if Ranger had sensed a person nearby or simply smelled the remnants of danger clinging to the children's clothes. Either way, the unease stayed with him. When Harper and June reappeared, they looked impossibly small in the oversized clothes. Harper's damp hair clung to her cheeks. June's eyes seemed brighter now, her lips less blue. Elias guided them to the sofa near the fireplace and placed a thick wool blanket around their shoulders. He moved into the kitchen. A character appeared here, Nora Finch, his neighbor from 2 cabins down. Nora, a woman in her mid-60s, had a compact frame and quick, purposeful steps from decades working as a mountain nurse. Her silver hair was always tied back in a loose braid, and her eyes, faintly green, held a mix of sternness and compassion. She was known in Pine Hollow for speaking bluntly, but always with intention. Nora had endured the loss of her only son in a wildfire years ago, and though grief had carved deep lines in her face, it had also made her fiercely protective of any child in trouble. Elias texted her briefly, "Found 2 kids, need help with supplies." She responded immediately, "On my way, 10 minutes." He heated chicken broth and prepared toasted bread, adding a little honey to balance the salt. When he returned, the girls sat wrapped in the blanket, both watching the flickering fire as if it were a fragile miracle. Harper sat straight, alert despite exhaustion. June leaned against her shoulder, half asleep already. "You can eat," Elias said, placing bowls on the low table. June took the spoon first and tasted the broth. Her eyes widened in soft disbelief. Harper waited until June took 3 bites before picking up her own spoon. Elias noticed Harper constantly checking the room, ensuring that Ranger, the kitchen, and the windows remained in her line of sight. Fear didn't leave quickly. It stayed like a stain until trust slowly replaced it. A knock sounded on the door. Harper jumped. June clutched the blanket. Ranger stood instantly, head raised, growl low, but controlled. "It's okay," Elias assured them. "Just a friend?" When he opened the door, cold air swept in along with Nora Finch. She carried 2 bags stuffed to the brim with essentials. She surveyed the scene with a nurse's instinct, eyes sweeping from the children's posture to their hands to the bruises half hidden along Harper's wrist. "Oh, Elias," Nora murmured. "These girls need warmth and rest before anything else." Harper stiffened. Nora immediately softened her posture, making her movements slow and non-threatening. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Nora. I live nearby. I brought some clothes and warm tea." Nora set the bags down gently, careful not to block the children's view of the door, an instinct she had learned from working with traumatized kids years ago. June peeked over the blanket at her. Nora smiled in a way that eased edges rather than forced comfort. While Nora laid out mittens and scarves, Elias checked the windows. A faint set of tracks in the snow caught his eye, fresh, deeper than his own boot prints. Someone had walked near the property within the last hour. Elias's stomach tightened. He said nothing yet, but made a mental note to investigate later. Back inside, Harper suddenly spoke, her voice fragile but firm. Are we going to stay here tonight?" "Yes," Elias answered without hesitation. "You're safe. You can sleep here." Harper nodded, but the look in her eyes was more complex. Fear, hope, and disbelief twisted into one. June whispered, "Can Ranger stay near us?" Ranger perked up as if waiting for permission. "Of course," Elias said. June smiled for the first time that night, a tiny, shy smile that lit her face like a candle in a storm. Elias prepared the sofa into a bed with blankets and pillows. Harper tucked June in first, hovering protectively like a small guardian angel. Ranger curled on the rug at their feet, but kept his head raised, watching the windows with steady vigilance. Nora touched Elias's arm lightly. "I'll be back in the morning," she whispered. "But Elias, be careful. Something tells me this isn't just a case of neglect." He nodded. The tracks outside said the same. When the cabin finally quieted, Harper whispered to him, "You won't let anyone take us tonight, right?" Elias knelt beside the sofa. Harper's eyes shimmered under the firelight, filled with fear she tried hard to hide. "No," he said. "I'll be right here." Ranger edged closer, placing his head near Harper's hand. June reached over and rested her fingers against his warm fur. The dog stayed perfectly still, a living shield between them and the shadows. The fire crackled softly. The storm outside faded to a distant sigh. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, the girls closed their eyes in a place where danger couldn't reach them. Tonight, warmth would hold them. Tomorrow, the truth would begin to surface. Morning arrived slowly in Pine Hollow, with sunlight pushing through a veil of thin fog like a shy guest peeking into the room before entering. The frost on the cabin windows softened into dew, dripping in little beads onto the wooden sill. Inside, the fire had long burned down into warm embers, casting a faint orange glow over the living room where Harper and June still slept, curled together beneath a wool blanket. Ranger lay stretched across the rug, ears flicking periodically as he monitored every sound inside and out. Elias Rowe hadn't slept at all. He had sat at the kitchen table for most of the night, elbows on the wood, fingers pressed against his brow as he tried to piece together what little he knew. Ranger occasionally patted over, nudging him, as if reminding him to breathe. But the tracks he'd seen outside left a knot in his chest that wouldn't loosen. Someone had been near the house, someone who didn't belong. When dawn finally broke, he rose and grabbed his coat. Ranger stood immediately, tail low, but ready. "Just checking the perimeter," Elias whispered, glancing at the sleeping children. "Stay quiet." Outside, the air smelled of pine sap and melting frost. Birds chirped cautiously as though unsure winter was truly retreating. Elias walked the edge of the property until he found them again. Faint footprints, wider than a woman's step, heavier too, like someone who carried tension in every stride. They followed the tree line and disappeared toward the old logging road that had been abandoned after the mill closed down 5 years ago. Elias crouched and touched the print, fresh enough to belong to late night or early dawn. Someone was watching. Ranger nudged his hand. Elias gave him a soft scratch behind the ears. "We'll figure it out." When they returned inside, Harper was sitting up. Her hair was tousled, the flannel shirt too big around her narrow shoulders. She tried to act calm, but her small fingers twisted the edge of the blanket, nervous, alert, ready to react. "Good morning," Elias said, setting his coat aside. Harper studied him carefully. "Did you go outside?" "I did. Just checking the property. Everything's okay." Harper didn't look convinced. June began to stir. Ranger walked to her, nudging her cheek. Her smile bloomed like morning sunlight. A knock sounded on the door. Harper flinched so hard she nearly toppled backward. June pressed into her side. Ranger growled low, positioning himself between the door and the sofa. "It's all right," Elias said, but his stomach tightened. That knock didn't belong to Nora, whose knock was always soft and rhythmic. This one was firm, controlled, official. Elias opened the door to find Deputy Cole Maddox, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s. He had close-cropped black hair, a square jaw, and a permanent crease between his eyebrows that made him look serious, even when smiling. Cole was reliable, disciplined, and straightforward, traits he developed after raising 2 sons alone when his wife left the family years ago. Though stern in appearance, he had a strong protective instinct for the vulnerable. "Morning, Elias," Cole said, voice steady. "Got your message." Elias stepped aside to let him in. Harper instantly clutched June, both retreating deeper into the sofa shadows. Cole lifted his hands, palms up, signaling no threat. "Hello there," he said gently. "My name's Cole. I work with Officer Rowe. I just want to make sure you're safe." Harper didn't answer. Cole looked at Elias. "You said it was urgent." "Last night," Elias said quietly, "I found fresh tracks around the cabin." Cole's expression hardened. "Human?" "Yes." Cole surveyed the interior, noting Harper's bruises, June's pale cheeks, Ranger's vigilance. "I'll call in a report. But first, do we know anything about who might be looking for the kids?" "No," Elias said, "but they're terrified. We need to handle this carefully." Just then, another car drove up the gravel road. Harper's eyes widened in panic. June grabbed Ranger's fur. The German shepherd positioned himself protectively, his gaze unblinking on the door. "It's okay," Elias said again, though even he felt unease coiling inside his chest. Through the window, a familiar figure stepped out. Dr. Miriam Hale, a pediatrician from the community clinic. Miriam was in her early 50s with warm brown eyes framed by fine wrinkles and shoulder-length silver-streaked hair. She had an aura of patience and quiet steadiness, qualities developed from decades of treating children in mountain communities where emergencies were common and resources were scarce. She was compassionate but firm, a woman who had weathered loss herself after her husband died of a heart attack 10 years ago. Since then, she had poured her energy into caring for children, as though every one of them could have been hers. Elias opened the door before she could knock. "Miriam, thanks for coming." Her eyes softened at the sight of the girls. "Nora called me. I brought some medical supplies." Harper's hands tightened on June's shoulders, her entire body stiffening as the doctor approached. Miriam stopped several feet away, lowering herself to a crouch. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm a doctor. My job is to make sure you're not hurt." Harper didn't speak, but June peeked at Miriam from behind Harper's arm. Ranger sniffed Miriam's bag and then looked back at the girls, seeming to give his approval. Miriam gave the smallest smile. "May I just check your hands? You can stay right where you are." After a long hesitation, Harper extended her wrist. Miriam examined the bruises with practiced care. These marks are healing, but not well, she murmured. This didn't happen from a simple fall. Harper looked down, ashamed of wounds not her fault. Miriam looked at Elias. We need to notify child services soon. These girls have been through something serious. I know, Elias said, but I want to make sure they're emotionally stable before we pull them into procedures. Cole crossed his arms, thinking. What about the woman, the one who threw them out? Harper's head snapped up, eyes filling with panic. Don't, she whispered. Don't let her take us back. Elias knelt beside her. Harper's breaths came fast and shaky. June clung to her like a shadow. You're safe, he promised. No one is taking you anywhere without me. A sudden rustle outside made Ranger spring to his feet. Elias moved to the window and saw a dark SUV driving away quickly, tires kicking frost behind it. Cole swore under his breath. Same car from the alley? Elias nodded. I'm sure of it. Miriam's brows furrowed. Whoever that is, they're watching. Harper whispered. She's looking for us. Elias knelt again, steadying his voice. Harper, listen to me. No matter who it is, they can't come inside without going through me. You're protected here. Ranger pressed his head into Harper's hand, grounding her. Cole straightened. I'm staying for the next few hours. No way that SUV shows up twice by coincidence. Thank you, Elias said. Miriam packed up her bag, but lingered near the girls, sensing their fear. Elias, she said softly, I'll file a confidential medical alert. No names you don't approve, but this way, if anything happens, the hospital will be prepared. Harper lifted her eyes to Miriam, still scared, but something in the doctor's calm built the smallest ember of trust. Miriam left after a few minutes, promising to return with more supplies. Cole positioned himself near the door like a silent wall. Elias sat beside the sofa, the fire crackling gently behind them. Harper spoke so quietly, he almost didn't hear her. She'll keep trying, she whispered. She won't stop. Elias met her gaze with steady certainty. Then she'll learn, he said, that she picked the wrong children to lose. Ranger lay down beside them, eyes on the door, chest rising and falling like a living shield. The truth was on its way, and so was the danger that came with it. But for now, Elias would guard them through the storm. The day grew colder as noon approached, the sun hanging low like a pale coin in the sky. Pine Hollow seemed quieter than usual, almost unnaturally so, as if the town itself sensed trouble circling the edges of Elias Rowe's cabin. Snowmelt dripped from the pine branches outside, ticking softly against the porch railings like a warning clock counting down. Inside, the cabin felt warmer but tenser, the atmosphere thick with the unspoken truth that danger was inching closer. Harper and June stayed bundled on the sofa, Ranger lying across their feet like a sentinel. Cole Maddox stood by the door, arms folded, eyes scanning through the narrow window. His radio crackled occasionally, but nothing significant came through. Elias finished a call with the precinct and set his phone down. No sightings of that SUV, he reported quietly, but 2 hikers saw tire tracks on Miller Pass Road around dawn. Cole frowned. That road leads straight to the old lumber mill. Elias nodded. And that's exactly why I don't like it. The lumber mill had been closed for years, abandoned after a major equipment accident that injured several workers, including Franklin Doss, a middle-aged maintenance supervisor whose misfortune had left him with a permanent limp and a bitter reputation. Franklin, now in his early 50s, was a tall, raw-boned man with coarse gray hair and a scar across his left cheek from a falling pipe. His temper was short, sharpened by chronic pain. People in town described him as a man carved from old wood, hard, splintered, but stubborn enough to stand through storms. He lived alone in a trailer near the old mill and had mixed with questionable crowds since losing his job. If someone in Pine Hollow needed dirty work done, Franklin usually had a hand in it. Elias exhaled slowly. Franklin owes money to half the county. If someone paid him to watch the cabin. Cole finished the thought grimly. He'd do it. Harper's small voice cut through the silence. She knows where we are. June gripped Ranger's fur tighter. The dog leaned gently against her leg. Cole softened his tone for the children's sake. No one is getting in here. You hear me? No one. Just then, another vehicle rumbled up the road. Elias moved toward the door. Cole tensed, and Ranger rose in a smooth, silent motion. But as the engine shut off, a familiar rhythmic knock echoed. Nora Finch. Elias opened the door. Nora entered with her usual briskness, cheeks flushed from the cold. She carried 2 thermoses and a tote bag full of fresh bread and fruit. "I heard about the truck up the road," she said, handing Elias a thermos. "So I thought everyone could use something warm." Harper relaxed a fraction. June peeked at the bread. Nora moved toward them, stopping a respectful distance away. "Good morning, girls. I brought apple slices and warm cinnamon tea." June sat up, straighter. "Thank you," she whispered. Harper watched Nora with cautious eyes, but slowly reached for a slice of bread. While the children ate, Nora leaned close to Elias and murmured, "I saw Franklin Doss walking near the mill this morning. He looked uneasy, kept checking the road, like he expected someone." Elias's gut clenched. Nora's observations were rarely wrong. Losing her son had sharpened her ability to read danger the way some people read weather. Cole muttered, "That's it. I'm calling Harris for backup." Before he could reach for his radio, the cabin's landline rang, a rare occurrence. Elias answered. A wavering male voice came through. "Officer Rowe, this is Samuel Briggs." Elias straightened immediately. Samuel Briggs, the funeral worker who had been mentioned vaguely in the past. Someone connected to Harper and June's father. Samuel was in his 70s, with thinning white hair and the soft, weary demeanor of a man who'd spent decades helping families through grief. He was known for his kindness, but also for his meticulous honesty. A widower, he spent most afternoons repairing old rocking chairs behind his workshop. "Yes, Mr. Briggs, what can I do for you?" Elias asked. Samuel hesitated. "I need to speak with you, today. It concerns Thomas Hale, the girl's father." Elias felt Harper's eyes on him. He turned away so she wouldn't hear his change in tone. "Is this about guardianship matters?" "It's more than that," Samuel whispered. "Thomas left something behind, for the children, and he named someone specific to protect them. But I couldn't deliver it." "Why not?" Elias pressed. "Because their guardian refused to let me see them." Harper's breath hitched behind him. She had heard enough to recognize who that guardian was. "Where are you now?" Elias asked. "At my workshop, but I think I was followed." Elias exchanged a glance with Cole. Cole mouthed, "Franklin?" Elias kept his voice steady. "Stay inside and lock the doors. I'll come to you." "No," Samuel said sharply. "Bring the girls. They need to see this themselves. It's their father's last wish." Elias froze. This was bigger than he expected. "I'll be there," Elias said, then hung up. Cole stepped closer. "You think this is legit?" "Samuel Briggs has never lied in his life," Elias replied. "If he says Thomas left something, we need to hear it." Nora added quietly, "And if Samuel was followed, we don't have time." Harper hugged June tighter. "Is he safe?" "He will be," Elias said. "But we have to go now." They moved quickly. Elias grabbed coats, mittens, and scarves. Ranger paced anxiously, sensing urgency. Cole loaded his sidearm. Nora prepared a medical bag, just in case. Within minutes, they were ready. But as they stepped onto the porch, Harper froze. A black SUV rolled slowly down the road, stopping just far enough to seem innocent. The windows were tinted, the engine idling. June whimpered. Ranger bared his teeth. Cole moved forward, jaw clenched, hand resting on his holster. "They're testing us, watching who comes and goes." Elias positioned himself between the vehicle and the girls. His voice felt like steel when he spoke. "We're leaving, now." The SUV didn't move. Then, as though deciding to retreat for now, it reversed slowly, turned around, and disappeared behind the trees, leaving tire prints scarring the snow. Elias led the girls to his truck. Ranger jumped into the back with them, positioning himself between their seats like a living fortress. Nora followed them in her own car. Cole drove ahead in his cruiser, lights off but ready. As the convoy pulled away, wind swirling around them like a warning, Elias looked into the rearview mirror. Harper wasn't looking at the forest. She wasn't looking at the road. She was looking directly into his eyes. "Please don't let her find us," she whispered. Elias tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "She won't," he said. And though danger pressed in from both sides of the forest, he drove forward, toward Samuel Briggs, toward the truth Thomas Hale left behind, and toward the turning point that would change everything. Snow swirled lightly across the road as Elias Rowe drove toward the workshop of Samuel Briggs. Pine Hollow's forest rose around them in dark, towering silhouettes, branches heavy with frost. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the trees themselves leaned in, listening. Harper sat in the back seat beside June, both bundled tightly in blankets. Ranger pressed his body firmly between them like a warm, silent shield. His ears twitched constantly, alert to every shift in sound, tires on slush, whispering branches, the occasional snap of distant ice. Ahead of them, Cole Maddox's cruiser cut a steady path, moving with the calm efficiency of a man who had survived enough chaos to understand when danger was real. Behind them, Nora Finch's old Subaru followed, its headlights casting a soft glow through the falling snow. She refused to stay behind. Her protective instinct was too strong. Elias kept glancing at the forest, expecting the black SUV to reappear at any moment. "We're close," he said quietly. "Samuel's workshop is just past this bend." Harper's fingers curled tighter into Ranger's fur. June leaned into her sister's shoulder, eyes wide, searching for reassurance Harper didn't have, but tried to give anyway. Ranger licked her hand softly. June let out a tiny exhale. At the end of the narrow road sat a small wooden building with a rusted metal roof and a crooked porch. A sign above the door read, "Briggs Woodwork and Repairs" in faded paint. Smoke rose from its chimney, thin, wavering, as though the fire inside struggled to keep itself alive. Cole parked in front, stepping out with one hand near his holster. Elias followed. Ranger jumped out next, scanning the surroundings with sharp, focused eyes. Nora approached too, clutching her medical bag. Just as Elias raised his hand to knock, the door cracked open. Samuel Briggs appeared in the doorway. He was smaller than Elias remembered. Thin shoulders beneath a flannel shirt, white hair combed back neatly, and gentle eyes dulled by exhaustion. Deep lines creased his face, the marks of years spent comforting grieving families. He held a manila envelope close to his chest with trembling fingers. "Come in, please," Samuel said. "Quickly." Inside, the workshop smelled of sawdust and old pine. Wooden toys, rocking chairs, and half-finished carvings lined the shelves. A dim lamp flickered on a workbench cluttered with chisels and sandpaper. Harper and June stayed close to Elias as they entered. Samuel locked the door behind them. "I was right to ask you to hurry," Samuel said. "Someone drove past here twice since dawn. Same vehicle." "The SUV?" Cole asked sharply. Samuel nodded. "Black, tinted windows. Engine too quiet to be one of the local trucks." Ranger paced in a small circle, nose working, tail stiff. A subtle sign, he sensed tension. Samuel motioned them toward a round table near the fireplace. The heat was faint, but enough to take the edge off the cold. He sat down with a heavy sigh. "I suppose I should start from the beginning," he said. "Thomas Hale came to see me 2 months before he died." Harper stiffened at her father's name. June grabbed her hand. Samuel's voice softened. "Your father loved you more than anything in this world. He worried constantly about what would happen to you if something ever happened to him." Harper blinked rapidly, swallowing hard. "He asked me how to prepare a legal guardian statement. He didn't want the woman he was living with to have custody." Elias leaned forward. He knew something was wrong. "Oh, he knew very well," Samuel said, the weight of knowledge settling over the room like heavy snow. "Roxanne had debts. She hid them at first, but eventually he found bank statements, credit cards he never opened, loans he didn't sign for. He confronted her. After that, everything went downhill." Nora clenched her jaw. "Why didn't he leave her?" "Thomas was trying to," Samuel said sadly. "He planned to move out, take the girls, and ask Elias," he looked at the officer, "to help transition them until Thomas got settled." Elias's eyes widened. "He wanted me? Why?" Samuel managed a faint, sad smile. "Thomas said you were the only decent man he knew who lived without expecting anything in return. He trusted you." He slid the manila envelope across the table. This is his written guardianship assignment. He asked me to keep it until the time came. Elias didn't touch it yet, stunned. Harper reached a small hand toward the envelope, then pulled it back as if afraid she wasn't allowed. Samuel continued. After Thomas died, I tried to deliver this. But when I arrived, Roxanne blocked the door. She told me the girls were resting and threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. Harper's voice cracked. She didn't want us to know. No, sweetheart, Samuel said softly. She didn't. Cole rubbed his jaw. So, Roxanne is probably the one who hired Franklin Doss to watch the cabin, Nora muttered. Then she's more desperate than we realized. Samuel's hands shook slightly. There's something else. He stood and retrieved a wooden box from a high shelf. Handcrafted with fine detailing, it looked like a keepsake chest. Inside lay a folded piece of paper and a flash drive. This, Samuel said, is what Thomas asked me to give the girls when it was safe. Harper's breath hitched. What is it? A letter, Samuel replied softly. And something he recorded. I don't know what's on the drive, but Thomas said it explains everything. Elias reached out and finally touched the manila envelope. It felt impossibly heavy for something made of paper. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears pricking, a low growl built in his throat. Cole stepped to the window. His expression darkened. They're here, Cole said quietly. SUV stopped down the road. June whimpered. Harper grabbed her. Elias stood, his entire posture shifting into defensive mode. Everyone stays inside. Cole, get to the back window. Nora, keep the girls away from sight lines. Samuel paled. I knew they'd follow. We're prepared, Elias said firmly. Ranger moved to Harper and June, placing his body between them and the door. The SUV engine rumbled closer, crunching the snow with slow, deliberate menace. Elias positioned himself near the front window, but froze when the driver leaned forward. A woman with sharp features, cold eyes, and dark hair pulled tight into a bun. Pale skin, expensive coat, long red nails tapping the steering wheel. Her beauty had a hard edge to it, like glass polished but dangerous. Roxanne. She smiled faintly, chillingly, when she saw Elias watching. June buried her face into Ranger's fur. Harper whispered, She found us. Elias stepped away from the window and looked at them. No, he said, voice steady as bedrock. She found me, and that's a problem for her, not for you. Outside, Roxanne shut off her engine. Inside, Elias raised his hand, signaling complete silence. The truth was finally in his hands. And now, the storm was coming through the door. In every chapter of this story, we are reminded that God does not always move through thunder or fire. Sometimes his miracles arrive quietly, through the courage of a child, the loyalty of a dog, or the kindness of a stranger who refuses to look away. What happened to Harper and June shows us that even in our darkest winters, God places the right people on our path to lead us back into the light. And maybe that is the message for us today. In our everyday lives, we face hardship, loneliness, or battles that no one else sees. But God is still working in the background, shaping small mercies into miracles. A gentle word, an unexpected friend, a door opening when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, please share it so more people can feel this reminder of hope. Leave a comment and tell us your thoughts. And if you want to walk with us through more stories of faith, loyalty, and second chances, remember to subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and protect your family today and always. And if you believe in the power of his miracles, type Amen in the comments.